The laughter was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the diner. At a corner booth, a group of teenagers pointed, their phones raised not to capture a memory, but a mockery. Their target was an old man, his posture weary, hunched over a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. And their focus was his coat, a heavy tweed overcoat, frayed at the cuffs and visibly patched at the elbow, a relic from a different era. They whispered, they snickered, they called it a dust rug. But deep in his pocket, folded and frail against the lining, was a forgotten letter. And that letter held a story that would silence them all. Every morning at 10 a.m., like a clock wound by memory alone, Mr. Elias would shuffle into Helen's Sunrise Diner. He would take the same seat at the counter, the one with a slight view of the park across the street. He'd order a single black coffee, and he'd sit for hours. Helen, the owner, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense apron, never rushed him. She'd just refill his cup with a soft smile. The regulars knew him as quiet, a man of few words, always wearing that enormous, outdated coat, even in mild weather. The teenagers were newcomers, a regular Friday hangout spot for them after class. To them, Mr. Elias was just part of the diner's furniture, and his coat was an oddity, a joke. Jake, the ringleader, was the first to snap a picture. "Hey, Grandpa," he called out, not with malice, but with a careless cruelty only youth can muster. "Did that coat come with the Titanic? Might be time for an upgrade." His friends giggled, egging him on. Mr. Elias didn't turn. He just seemed to shrink deeper into the fabric, his gnarled fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. Helen, from behind the counter, shot the teens a warning look, but it only made them lower their voices, not their scorn. This went on for weeks. The mockery became their routine. They'd make up stories about the coat's fictional adventures. They'd pretend to sneeze dramatically from ancient dust. They'd comment on how he must be hiding a fortune in those deep pockets. Mr. Elias never reacted. He just continued his silent vigil at the counter, his presence a quiet mystery. But one Friday, something changed. As Jake made a particularly loud comment about the coat smelling of mothballs and regret, Mr. Elias stood up to leave. In his slow, careful movement, his elbow caught his coffee cup. It tipped, sending a dark stream across the counter and, crucially, onto the floor right where Jake was sitting, splashing his pristine white sneakers. "Watch it, old man," Jake yelped, jumping up. The diner fell silent. Mr. Elias looked stricken, his eyes wide with apology. He fumbled in his pocket, not the one where he kept his meager change, but the deeper inner pocket. I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. What he pulled out to offer as a makeshift napkin was not a tissue, but a yellowed, fragile envelope. It fluttered from his trembling hand and landed on the sticky diner floor right at Jake's feet. Jake, still annoyed, bent to pick it up, intending to hand it back with a sarcastic remark. But as he did, the envelope, old and weak at the seal, opened. A single delicate sheet of paper, covered in elegant looping handwriting, slipped part way out. His eyes, almost against his will, caught the first line. "My dearest Elias, if you are reading this, then the winter has come without me." He stopped. The words were so intimate, so full of a quiet love, that they felt like a shout in the silent diner. His friends peered over his shoulder. The laughter died in their throats. Helen came around the counter, her expression gentle. She placed a hand on Elias's arm, seeing the profound distress on his face. "It's all right, Elias. It's okay." She looked at Jake, her gaze holding his. "Maybe you should give that back to him." But Jake couldn't move. He was reading more, his heart hammering against his ribs. The letter was from a woman named Clara. It spoke of a love cut short by illness, of memories woven into the very fabric of a coat, this coat that she had tailored for him with her own hands before she passed.
I lined the pockets with the fabric from my wedding dress, so a part of me will always keep your hands warm. And in this left pocket, I leave you my final goodbye. Wear it and remember our walks in the park. Wait for me there, my love." Jake looked from the letter to the coat to the old man's face, now etched with a loss so deep it was a physical presence. The patches weren't signs of poverty, but of care. The fraying cuffs weren't neglect, but the evidence of a lifetime of wear, a lifetime of missing someone. The coat wasn't a joke. It was a sacred artifact, a walking memorial to a love that never ended. Mr. Elias waited by the park window every day because he was still keeping a promise. He was still waiting for her. The realization hit Jake like a physical wave. The shame was instant and overwhelming. This man wasn't ignoring their taunts. He was living in a world where their words were just distant, meaningless noise compared to the symphony of his memory. He held in his hands not just a letter, but a man's heart, preserved in ink and fabric. Slowly, carefully, Jake approached the counter. He didn't hand the letter back. Instead, in a voice thick with emotion, he did something extraordinary. He asked, "Mr. Elias, sir, would it be okay if I read it out loud?" The old man studied him for a long moment, seeing the mocking smirk replaced by earnest, wet-eyed sincerity. He gave the faintest nod, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. And so, in the hushed sunrise diner, Jake began to read Clara's letter. His voice, once used for ridicule, now trembled with reverence. He read of her love, her courage, her wish for him to find joy in the sunlight of the park. He read about the lining of the pockets, sewn with hope and farewell. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. His friends were silent, staring at their laps, utterly transformed. Jake gently slid the letter back into its envelope and placed it in Elias's hands. Then, without a word, he took off his own stylish jacket and hung it on the back of his chair. He rolled up his sleeves. He walked to the janitor's closet, got a mop and a bucket, and began to quietly, diligently clean up the spilled coffee. It was a small act, a silent apology written in water and effort. One of his friends stood up and went to help Helen behind the counter, refilling water glasses for other customers. Another simply went over and sat on the stool next to Mr. Elias, not speaking, just offering quiet company. From that day on, the diner changed. The teenagers still came on Fridays, but their booth was often empty. They could be found taking turns sitting with Mr. Elias at the counter. They brought him snippets of news, asked about the park's history, and listened, really listened, when he occasionally shared a fragment of a story about Clara. They learned that the coat came out every year on the anniversary of her passing, and on her birthday he would place a single wildflower from the park in its buttonhole. The mockery had been replaced by a protective, respectful kindness. They became, in their own way, his guardians, ensuring no one else in the diner would ever look at his coat with anything less than understanding. One particularly bright autumn morning, Mr. Elias arrived without the coat. The teenagers exchanged worried glances. He saw their concern and offered a small, peaceful smile. "It's a warm day," he said softly. Then he added, his eyes clear, "And Clara always loved the sun on my face." He had not forgotten nor moved on, but he had found a sliver of peace, partly warmed by the unexpected kindness of a group of strangers he now called friends. The letter remained in the pocket, of course. It always would, but the pocket and the coat that held it was no longer a symbol of something to be ridiculed. It had become a lesson, a silent teacher in the shape of worn tweed. It taught everyone in that little diner that every person carries an invisible weight, a story folded deep within them. And sometimes the most unassuming exterior, the most mocked and overlooked thing, guards the most profound and beautiful truth. Sometimes the greatest kindness is not in grand gestures, but in the decision to look deeper, to be silent and to listen to the story before the first word is ever spoken. Share this story if it touched your heart.